okay, so you can't be in cash, you're getting debased, gold is not cutting it, real estate is not what you think it is, bonds have negative real yields, and if you're a larger business, you can give the capital back to the shareholders, you can get dividends, you can do mergers and acquisitions. When you really, really look at all these things, you realize none of it makes any sense. It's not ideal. And when you then present Bitcoin, here we have a global, open, incorruptible monetary system with a completely limited supply, 24/7 liquidity. It has the best performance of any asset. It's a commodity. It's not a security. You don't have the management risk, the execution risk, and all these kind of things that you see with equities and this. And when you look at it from that perspective, it's just like, wow, like it's incredible, actually.
Welcome to the Business Bitcoinization Show, the show dedicated to helping you enrich your life and grow your business with Bitcoin, the hardest money on planet Earth. I'm your host, Josh Friedemann, and our guest today is Daniel Frank, who's the founder of Sovreign, which is a Bitcoin consulting company that helps to onboard businesses to Bitcoin. On today's interview, we're going to talk with Daniel about the first steps they take to educate business owners about Bitcoin and how you can get started with your own Bitcoin strategy. We're going to get to our interview with Daniel right after this. Business owners, unlock the benefits Bitcoin has to offer your business with the Bitcoin for Business Quick Start Guide. This 27-page guide highlights the 6 ways you can grow your business with Bitcoin. Check it out in the show notes. Daniel, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Josh. It's a pleasure to be here.
So I like to start off every single interview with a few questions that help us to get to know you a little bit better and give us some insight for our own lives. So you ready for these?
Absolutely.
Question number 1 is this: when and how did you first learn about Bitcoin?
Yeah, it's funny. I got into Bitcoin back in 2017 during the whole ICO boom and the whole crypto Wild West thing. And it was a big waste of time because I didn't understand the difference between Bitcoin and crypto. And eventually sold all my Bitcoin, all my crypto. When the bear market came, all my friends did the same. We dismissed it. When I came back again in late 2020, early 2021, it's a completely different space. And that's when I delved into the Bitcoin maximalism kind of sphere of things. And that's where I think the real signal is.
Question number 2, what's an insight or fact about Bitcoin that you wish everyone understood?
Right. I wish more people outside of like the Bitcoin echo chamber understood that Bitcoin is a technology and not an investment. It is kind of difficult to describe, but I think most people look at Bitcoin as some sort of novelty, or it's a currency or a coin or a stock. But it's actually a fundamental technology and protocol that solves a very real problem. And I think when you see it from that perspective, it changes how you kind of approach it.
And if someone were to ask you, what is that problem that Bitcoin solves as a technology, how would you respond to them?
Perfect question. I mean, fundamentally, it solves the Byzantine generals problem, the double spend problem. But that's a computer sciencey way of explaining that Bitcoin removes the middleman and gives the power back to the people. And it's a protocol that works without human intervention and, by extension, human corruption. Because anytime you give humans control of anything, it's very tempting to take control of it. And Bitcoin is just for everybody, and nobody controls it. And that's what makes it beautiful.
And I frequently will tell people that no one controls it, no corporation, no nation, no individuals. And exactly. I just tell them, like, I can explain why that is, but it sounds almost impossible to believe because so many things in this world, maybe you could say everything, is controlled by someone, can be manipulated by someone. But it's so unique that Bitcoin can't be. And I'll tell people, hey, we can go into the details, but just for the sake of this conversation, accept that fact for right now. And this is why Bitcoin is so powerful, because going into some of those details, that's what takes so much time. We'll probably touch on some of that later on in the interview, because I know you probably have to explain some of that to your clients. But I just think it's so powerful that Bitcoin simply cannot be controlled or in the long term manipulated by anyone. We see the price fluctuations, et cetera, but it's such a powerful thing.
It's beautiful, in my opinion. I think it's truly beautiful. It's a gift to humanity, and that's what
Mm.
I would love for people to understand. That it's not just something you can own on Robinhood or whatever. It's a paradigm shift in how humanity organizes itself.
Hmm. Question number 3, what's the Bitcoin resource you most recommend to other people?
Well, it's the resource that got me into the rabbit hole. That's the Sailor series with Robert Breedlove. I mean, it's
Yeah.
if stuff like that had been available back in 2017, my life would have been very different. A lot of people I know would have gotten a lot out of that, but that kind of signal was not available back then
Mm.
from anywhere that
Yeah.
I ever noticed. So, love that series. Can be highly recommended.
And I am the same way. That's what got me to take Bitcoin seriously for the first time. After having a couple conversations with people that I maybe didn't think knew what they were talking about, which I'm sure people have thought that about me as well. But a couple conversations with just individuals in my life. But then it was the Sailor series that really got me to take Bitcoin a little bit more seriously. And it was by probably the 3rd or 4th episode I was all in. Now,
It's crazy.
Yeah. Well, what I wanted to say is that I have recommended that to other people, and a few people have taken me up on listening to at least some of the episodes. But I don't know if anyone else that I've recommended it to has taken Bitcoin that much more seriously because of it. So I almost feel like it's it's the resource that I like the most and was most impactful for me. But I've not found that it's been as impactful for other people. Have you had the same experience, or would you, when you've recommended it to other people, that's also been kind of a key for them?
Wow, that's a really good question, and very very insightful observation, because I do think it takes a certain kind of person to find it very interesting. I mean, what I like about it, so I always studied history, economics, investing, psychology, anthropology. So when you have somebody like Sailor start like, listen, here with the Stone Ages and explaining energy
Mm-hmm.
and human civilization, and then you inevitably end up at digital energy, digital capital. That fit perfectly with my worldview. But had I not had that previous exposure, and somebody just sent me that out of the blue, I think it might go a little bit over my head or just be a little bit too deep.
Mm-hmm.
So I've had some good results with it, but I
Good.
think it might not actually be the best beginner resource.
Well, and that's the thing. It's like the question is, what's the most recommended resource? And there are a handful of resources. I know of someone locally right now who's working on a resource that helps get people from 0 to 1. There's a lot of content out there that gets people from 1 to 2 or 2 to 3 on the ladder rung of on the ladder of Bitcoin knowledge.
Sure.
But there's very little that really goes from like nothing to 1. And there's this guy, I forget his name, but who was recently on TFTC that was talking about some of that type of education. I forget his name. Most people listening to this probably would have heard it. If not, they can find it. But do you remember who that was? / have you seen that yet?
I don't believe I do, but that is exactly what we need: as many very easily digestible formats of content that people can get up to speed on. Very important.
Yeah. Well, question number 4 is, beyond Bitcoin, what's a resource, tool, or idea that's been helpful to you or your work recently?
Right. I've recently started using a very interesting AI tool that is really helping me in my work. I think that would be my best answer to this. It's called Monica. It lives in my browser, and it just, if there's some sort of news article, it'll just summarize it, grab key points. When I'm on a website, I can just ask a question. That's the best thing. Like, I don't want to read your 10-page article. Just let me search, where is this information? And it just finds it. I mean, it's absolutely brilliant. Can do the same with the PDF. Can highly recommend that.
Excellent. And now we have our final, what we call our arbitrary but insightful question, and it's this. As a general life principle, is it better to ask why or why not?
It's such a good question. There's so many different answers to this, but I will actually say it's important to ask why. And I think as I get older and I reflect on my life choices, you realize that the opportunity cost in life is everything. And every choice you make is simultaneously you're not choosing every other choice. So we're sitting here right now, but I'm also simultaneously not doing everything else I could possibly do in the world. So if you don't ask yourself why you're doing something, you might end up wasting your time. I think it's very important to realize your time is scarce, and think hard about where you choose to give your attention.
Today's episode of Business Bitcoinization is proudly brought to you by Velis Commerce, where the future of business technology meets Bitcoin. As we journey through the era of Bitcoin and its transformational impact on businesses, there's one name that stands out: Velis Commerce. Whether you're looking to build a cutting-edge website, a seamless mobile app, or custom software, Velis is your go-to team. They've been diving deep into the world of Bitcoin since 2014, making them one of the most experienced groups for integrating Bitcoin and Lightning payments into a variety of digital platforms. But here's what truly sets them apart. Velis Commerce doesn't just build. They bring a wealth of knowledge to ensure your project's success from day one. Their team understands the nuances of Bitcoin, ensuring that your business stays ahead of the curve. And for all business Bitcoinization listeners out there, Velis Commerce is offering a free consultation to kickstart your project the right way. So if you're ready to future-proof your business in the coming age of hyper-Bitcoinization, head over to veliscommerce.com or reach out on Twitter at veliscommerce. Let's make sure your business thrives in the Bitcoin era. If you were hit by a bus right now, could your family access your Bitcoin? When's the right time to stop hodling and use Bitcoin to impact your family's lives, not just yours? What if Bitcoin doesn't reach the value you expect, or it takes longer to reach that value? Do you have a plan? Do you have the proper trust structure to avoid probate, maintain your privacy, and minimize taxes? Do you want to avoid taxes to stack more sats or leverage your stack without selling? Should you add Bitcoin to your business's balance sheet? Are you truly confident in your self-custody setup? If any of those questions made you stop and think, you probably realize that simply buying and holding Bitcoin is not a complete financial plan. That's where Strong Wealth comes in. Orange-pilled advisors blending traditional financial planning with deep Bitcoin expertise, giving you the best of both worlds, so you can sleep peacefully knowing you're making the right moves for your family no matter what happens. Schedule a free call at strongwealth.net. That's strongwealth.net. Strong Wealth, wealth management for Bitcoiners by Bitcoiners. Well, Daniel, we're here today to talk about your business, Sovreign, and how you're helping organizations to adopt Bitcoin. So I'd love to hear a little bit from you about how you guys got started and what you're doing right now.
Absolutely. Sovreign was really a kind of trying to fill a lack that I saw. We were just talking about the Bitcoin education. I come from a B2B background in marketing, that kind of stuff, and I was very fascinated about Bitcoin's application in business because the value proposition for a person or a company, it's the same, but there wasn't a whole lot of people talking about this. And so the idea for Sovreign was, let's create an educational company where we provide really good education to business owners to get them up to speed on Bitcoin, both as a treasury reserve asset, it can be payments, it can be cultural things in the company, it can be operationally. And then I figured, well, if we're going to be educating people with these free resources and podcasts and that, people are probably going to have questions that need some hand-holding. So let's get some advisors together. Let's find a team of experts to then offer people the opportunity to speak with them for whatever it is. And that's what we built. We have a great team now of lots of different consultants. Any kind of problem you have or question regarding Bitcoin, whether that's how do I approach it, how to buy it, store it, how's the regulation, accounting, taxes, integration, risk, public perception, anything, our experts can help with that. And I think it's a useful service. We're still very, very early, but I think Bitcoin for business is it's just getting started, but it's going to be a huge tsunami that's going to come.
Now, a couple questions about the team. How large are you guys? Are you pretty well distributed or fairly condensed in certain areas? And then also, do you have specialists, or is everyone pretty well versed in these number of different areas you've just talked about?
It's a wonderful question. And just off the bat, we're still a startup, so it's very early in the company. I started the firm about a year ago, and then about 6 months ago, I brought in a lot of different business partners like Joseph McGee and others that have really just taken the company to another level. And we're really very geographically spread out. The internal team, I'd say we're about 10 people, but we do have a very large roster of consultants because we've yet to find any one person that knows everything because it's too complex. It's too in the same way that Bitcoin touches on so many subjects, the implications of it in a business is beyond any one person's ability to understand, I think. Some people definitely know a lot, but we also have CPAs that can actually do accounting advice and tax advice, and different people that have come from traditional financial institutions like Fidelity, JP Morgan, Morgan Stanley, etc. And they bring that investment side of it, all these different people. And so the idea is when a client comes to us, we want to not just be like, oh, you should talk to Daniel or he knows everything. No, let's put together a team of people that are absolute experts in these areas so you can get the highest quality of service. She also asked where we're kind of distributed. We are focused in the US, and we're kind of all across the US from the West Coast to the East, and we do have people in Europe as well. But I think the majority of this Bitcoin adoption in 2025 is going to happen in the US. So that's where we're focusing.
And I was going to ask a follow-up question, but before I get there, why do you think most of it's going to happen in the United States? Is it because of the new the Trump administration, or do you think there's just other things afoot?
As a general notion, I think the US is the leader in innovation in the world. I think China is doing great, but they copied the US. They're a communist state. It's different. Well, now they're breaking out with AI, with DeepSeek and all that. But I think the US is always leading in innovation. And then now with the Trump administration, the proper fair value accounting rules coming in, SAB 121 being rescinded. I mean, there's so much headway. And when you then look at Europe, for example, where I'm at, it's just they try to provide clear regulation, but by doing so, they're also stifling the innovation and just making it so difficult for people to work here. So my eyes are focused on the US.
And then I guess another question on that same vein of thought.
Sure.
Why do you think Europe is like that? Like, what is it a sense of caution? Is it something else that I'm not thinking of? What is it about the European culture that's a little bit different? I've heard people talk about this before, but I'd be interested to hear from someone who actually lives there. And you know, sometimes you look at it and you say this is all negative. Sometimes there are some positives, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on why it's a little bit different in Europe.
Well, I appreciate you asking. I'm not sure I'm the right person to answer that question. I think, especially the European Union, I personally, and a lot of people here, see it as a power grab, and it just continually tries to encroach more and more on people's rights and freedoms. Obviously, it's all done in this collectivist spirit, and I think that might actually be where the root of the problem lies, in this collectivist thinking. And I disagree with a lot of things they do. Obviously, they also do good, and they do it with the intention, hey, we're doing this for your safety, for your protection. But that also means when Sora came out, I can't access it because it's not available in Europe, even though it's available in Bangladesh or whatever. So it's this regulation stifles innovation and it increases the cost of doing business, but it's also necessary. But that fine line, it's I think it's very difficult to walk, and I think that power to control other people's decisions, it's very appealing to people in the ECB and the European Union. They really like to control things. That's at least my opinion. I might be wrong on that.
Sure. And do you feel like that's the majority perspective in Europe, or is the majority kind of in line with the EU? And I ask that realizing that it's hard to know where the majority is. I mean, there's a lot of questions,
Sure.
even coming into the most recent presidential election, like where is everything going to fall? People had their opinions, and it ended up being really close. So, it's really hard to tell what other people are thinking, but what's the vibe that you get at least?
Yeah, it's a good question. I honestly, here in Denmark where I live, people honestly don't talk that much about the EU. It's very interesting. It seems to be something that's happening very much in the background. Whereas in the US, what the federal government is doing is obviously very interesting to everybody, but most people are not talking about this. I don't think I've heard a single person bring up something about what the European Central Bank is doing or how it's affecting our economy, or maybe it's the circle I'm in, but it's people don't really talk about it that much because we have our own country, we have our own government, and then we have this other group of people that are making all these laws and rules and regulations, but it seems to be going on outside of our sphere of kind of awareness. I don't know if that's at least how I see it, but I bet other people would have different opinions.
Sure. Well, so the question I was going to ask a few moments ago is, you mentioned when clients come to you, and I'm curious to know, do most businesses reach out to you, or is it still in that stage where you need to be reaching out to businesses to see if they're interested in accepting Bitcoin?
Yeah, very much the latter. I think we're still very early in this. I had actually anticipated that 2024 was going to be much bigger for the business adoption than it was. I think it's a general life lesson. Things always just happen slower than you anticipate. When you're on Bitcoin Twitter, sometimes you feel like, man, if I don't smash buy today, it's going to the moon tomorrow. Like the train is leaving the station. But we are focusing all of our attention on the education, because I think that's the most important thing. The people that are adopting Bitcoin in their business, I think they're the outliers. Metaplanet, Semler, MicroStrategy, these are all organizations led by very thoughtful, very innovative and creative leaders. And I think they are the exception, not the norm. I think it's going to take a lot of education, a lot of 0 to 1 kind of content. That's why we just came out with a Bitcoin for Beginners course. We're going to make a Bitcoin for Business course. We're coming out with our ebook, the business case for Bitcoin. And I want to give that stuff away to 1 million people. That's really the key. And I would much rather give away all the information for free, focus on the education. And then when people are ready, if they want to do it themselves and they feel comfortable with that, I'll gladly give them all the tools and resources for it. But it's also very complex to adopt Bitcoin in your business. There's a lot of things you don't think about it. So working with an advisor and having somebody to hold your hand is a very, very good idea.
Mm-hmm. I think it'd be good to talk about some of the things that people need to be thinking about if they're interested in accepting Bitcoin, and what some of those tools are that you would also recommend. But I think maybe first of all, what have you found to be the best pieces of education to give to people, or best, conversations to have to really help people to understand the potential that Bitcoin can bring to their business?
Interesting, but very good question. I think every time I try to approach this, which is what I've been doing the whole day before this, I try to think in a story. I don't want to just hit people with information. I want to weave a story, and in my mind, it has to hit on a lot of different subjects. So if we take somebody that doesn't understand Bitcoin and they don't understand the value proposition for a business, you can't just hit them with, well, here's the CAGR, here's why it's so good and all this. You gotta start with, what is money? It sounds cliche, but you gotta understand, what is money? Why is Bitcoin good money? Why is it the best form of money in our opinion? And then you look at, what is the investment case for Bitcoin? What does it actually mean? What are the returns? What's the volatility, the Sharpe ratio, all these kind of things? And then you have to compare it to other things. I think that's the key. So you look at, what is the traditional treasury management, or a lot of small businesses don't have a treasury strategy, so to say. But you have to keep your cash somewhere, or your profits, because if you keep it in cash, you're getting diluted. Well, that was part of the explanation. So you have to explain inflation. You have to explain what is hard money, what is soft money, why is Bitcoin hard money. Then you look at, okay, so you can't be in cash. It's you're getting debased. Gold is not cutting it. Real estate is not what you think it is. Stocks, it's maybe outpacing inflation by a little bit, but you can't just put all your treasury in a security, because then you'll become an investment company. Bonds have negative real yields. Obviously, all this is much more complex, but I'm oversimplifying it to make you understand and make people understand it. Once you actually look at this, okay, and if you're a larger business, you can give the capital back to the shareholders. You can give dividends. You can do mergers and acquisitions. You can. When you really, really look at all these things, you realize none of it makes any sense. It's not ideal. You're with any of these options, there's many flaws to it, and it's not a perfect solution. And when you then present Bitcoin, after we've looked at all the alternatives, and then you see here we have a global, open, incorruptible monetary system with a completely limited supply, 24/7 liquidity. It has the best performance of any asset. It's a commodity. It's not a security. You don't have the management risk, the execution risk, and all these kind of things that you see with equities and this. And when you look at it from that perspective, it's just like, wow, like it's incredible, actually.
So they have all that education. You have some of those conversations probably over the course of, multiple get-togethers. But once they have that understanding, what are the top / most popular questions that business owners tend to ask about the particular actions of adopting Bitcoin into their business?
I think the biggest concern most people have is the public perception and the volatility and kind of the FUD. It's not so much at least what I'm hearing, the intricacies of it. It's still this kind of low level FUD, like, oh, if I adopt this, what is my customers going to think? What about my shareholders? What if we invest and it crashes to half the price tomorrow? It's all these really basic things. Or, well, I like Bitcoin. Everything you said is great, but what about it boiling the ocean? I don't feel comfortable about that. Once you get over all of these different things, then it comes to much more practical things. But that seems to always be the first hurdle. And every time you have a conversation online, that's what people come with. We still need a lot of education on that front.
And then what are the tools that you guys tend to recommend as far as the services and maybe other things I'm not thinking of, that if a business owner says, okay, I'm ready to pull the trigger, I'm ready to get started with this, what are some of the best tools that you recommend to business owners, keeping in mind that each person may have different needs given different contexts?
Yeah, wonderful question. The way we've chosen to approach this is that we don't claim to be the best at everything, and we don't have all of these services in-house. I would love to be able to say that, well, come buy your Bitcoin with us, we'll store it for you, we'll do all these things, but that's just not the case. We could try to do all these things, but then I would be directly competing with people that probably do a lot better job, and that's their only focus.
Sure.
So the way we've chosen to do it is to make partnerships with the best companies and then pre-vetting them in order to refer our clients to them. So I think that's part of the value proposition of working with us. Is it's very difficult to find the right companies and information in Bitcoin, especially if you just search on Google. It's all crypto, blockchain, Web3, and all the really, really good signal is hidden below a wall of Forbes and Bloomberg articles and all that. So when you're ready to pull the trigger, we have relationships with the best providers in the industry, and they're all Bitcoin only companies. That's a big part of the value proposition of the firm too. We're Bitcoin only. Back when I originally started researching this business idea, and you search for a Bitcoin consultant, even still to this day, a lot of it is crypto consultants. And I would not recommend people to go into the lion's den like that. So to answer your question, each company is unique, and that's also why we haven't just partnered with one provider for each kind of task or service, because I think it would be a little bit disingenuous to say, oh, just use these people, they're the best for everybody, because that's just not the case. So you have to find a good place to purchase your Bitcoin. We can always recommend River, Bitcoin Well, these great established Bitcoin only companies. And then it depends, do you want to just create an account and just buy regularly? Do you need to buy large sums, OTC, for example? That changes it. How are you going to custody it? Are you actually going to do self-custody? And then which hardware wallets do you need? Well, we can educate you on that and get you some good deals on them. But maybe you're not ready for that. Maybe you want to outsource that. So what's that going to look like? Is that a on-ramp situation with a multi-institutional custody you're looking at? Is it you do a 2 or 3 setup with Thea, where you hold 2 keys and they hold a third, for example? So many different options, and that's why you have to talk with the client and figure out exactly what their situation is. It also depends. Are you just a barbershop down the street? Maybe you can survive with a single sig or multi-sig. You're the owner, you're the sole entrepreneur. If you got a big company, you need very thorough processes for who has access to the keys, where are they stored, who can sign transactions. And it kind of, you can make it sound simple, but when you really get into the nitty gritty, it's very complicated. And I would not even feel comfortable saying that I'm an expert in that. And that's why we've hired experts that sit there, do that all day. And they're the best at that.
So then I guess one final question that would be interesting to know is, with all that you guys have done so far, have you found any trends? Are there certain industries, for instance, that are particularly interested in accepting Bitcoin or could particularly benefit from it?
I wish I could tell you that, because that's what I'm trying to find. I'm trying to find some a red thread or whatever you call it, something to, like, this industry, this state, these kind of people, this demographic, psychographic. I've not been able to find that yet, but I think when somebody cracks that code, it's going to be very, very interesting. We've also been doing outbound, trying to reach people and get conversations started, trying to find some patterns. My hunch is that there are certain industries or areas of business that already align well with Bitcoin's values. People like farmers that are getting squeezed by the government, the idea of Bitcoin and having a payment system that they can't stop and all that is very appealing to them. So I think we need more data on this, but it's something I'm thinking a lot about, so I'm very curious about it.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Daniel, are there any final thoughts that you might have for the listeners today, things that we have not yet covered or that you just want to reiterate?
Great question. I mean, something I've been thinking a lot about lately is why more Bitcoin companies are not investing in Bitcoin. That's something I think is very interesting. Because when I originally set out, part of what we want to do is at Sovreign is reach pre-coiners. But I had the idea that Bitcoiners already understood the value proposition of Bitcoin for business. But I think you'll find a lot of Bitcoin companies that don't even hold one Bitcoin on their balance sheet. And I think it's very interesting, because Bitcoin is a lever for equity growth. And the main kind of argument against Bitcoin could be, well, it's risky. It's uncertain. But if your underlying operational business is already tied to Bitcoin success, what other risk do you add by adding the underlying asset? If Bitcoin hypothetically goes to zero, your business is also going to zero. So I think a lot of people should consider that and really, really think hard about that, because it's an amazing thing once you adopt Bitcoin in your business. And I love seeing the spirit and the energy that comes from a company. We see this with Semler and Metaplanet and all these companies, like they just come alive and take on a whole new kind of, or Real Bedford, or I could go on and on and on. It just brings a whole new spirit to the team. And I love seeing that.
Excellent. Well, Daniel, where can people go if they want to find out more about Sovreign, either because they know of a business who might be interested and they want to connect them with the right people, or because they themselves, after listening to this today, have said, hey, this might be a good next step for me?
Everybody can go to sovreign.io. They can find us on all of our social media channels. We're everywhere. They can find me, Daniel Frank, online. We're aggressively giving away free resources if that's what people need. We're also trying to build up a referral program because we realize a lot of people know business owners, so I want to make it as easy for people to fall down this rabbit hole as possible. So one of the things that I'm really looking forward to us releasing is what I call Project Orange Pill Your Boss. So you get a resource and it has all of the best curated recommended resources for an owner, a boss, a leader to get started. So if you're an employee and you're like, man, I wish I could just explain this to my boss, well, grab that, give that to them for free. If you have a friend, a brother, a cousin with a business and they want to get involved, send them our way and we can give you a nice commission for that. Everybody wins and we keep spreading the word of Bitcoin.
Excellent. Well, Daniel, thank you so much for your time today and for the great work you're doing. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much for having me, Josh. It was a pleasure being here after listening so many times. It was very enjoyable. Thank you so much.
Well, friends, it's a wrap. Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the Business Bitcoinization Show. If you want to reach out to either me or Daniel, you can find those links down in the show notes. And if you know of someone who'd be interested in accepting Bitcoin for their business, reach out to Sovreign. As always, keep building, keep growing, and until next time, keep living and leading well. Thanks to those who have supported the show on Fountain in the last week, including Bruce Bitcoin, who sent a comment about the episode with Christopher David. He said, thanks for the AI info this week. Alpaca is exploring AI integration for data insight now. Christopher brought up the token garbage out there infiltrating AI tools. It showed up in Venice.ai with free airdrops and 158% APR for staking. It just doesn't make sense to add that friction for a pro paid service too. We'll be looking deeper into open agents. Thanks, Bruce Bitcoin. And for anyone who's not aware, that's Doug Morton of Alpaca Retail Management System and Point of Sale. If you're interested in checking them out, you can go to alpacarms.com or Alpaca RMS POS on X. And of course, if you would like to support the show, you can listen on Fountain and either stream sats as you listen or send a boost. And if you include a comment with that boost, I'll plan to read it on the show.